Okay, everybody. My name is Ross Yelsey. I'm an Assistant Director of Admission and Marketing at Columbia Journalism School. I'd like to thank everyone for spending this Saturday morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you might be, learning more about Columbia Journalism School with our faculty, students, and alums as well. And I'll kind of introduce what we'll be doing right now. We're going to talk a bit about the different programs available at the school, talking more about the Master of Science program first, and a little later we'll talk about the Master of Arts program and distinguish a bit between the different opportunities available at the school. And we'll also have Gina Boubion, our Director of Career Development, talk later about some of the career paths you might be able to go on with an education at Columbia Journalism School. And then we'll open it up later to chat. So at this point, the chat function isn't working on the Zoom, but later we'll turn it on. And we'll have a period where you can ask questions in there, and we'll raise some questions and let you learn more about things that matter to you, whether it's programs, admissions, or other aspects of the Columbia experience. But to start first, I'd like to welcome our Dean of Student Life, John Haskins, who will just introduce the school to us. Hi, John. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon for most of you. I know that you're calling in from all across the country, and thank you very much for taking this time out on a Saturday to learn more about Columbia School, Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism. You're going to hear a lot of great information about the MS degree, the MA degree. We have a lot of great speakers on today, and later in discussion, you'll be able to ask a lot of questions, but I just enjoy seeing you all assembled here and seeing all of your faces, or at least your names if you don't have your camera on today. So welcome, and be prepared to learn quite a bit today about our great program here at Columbia.
Thanks, John. So what we're going to do first is talk mostly about our Master of Science program. So we have the Master of Science program, which is our largest program at the school. It's definitely the program that's been around since the inception of the school. And we'll talk about the different specializations within that and some of the other opportunities within the MS umbrella. And I'd like to welcome Elena Cabral, who is an Assistant Dean of Academic Programs and Communications at the school, as well as the Director of the part-time Master of Science program. I'd like to welcome Jonathan Soma, who teaches data journalism at the school, and I'd like to welcome Samantha Chaney, who's a current MS student, to be part of this discussion. And I believe Rita Omokha, a faculty member and a recent graduate of the MS program, will be joining us a little later to chime in about the program as well. But first, I'd like to talk to Professor Elena Cabral a bit about just what the MS program is. Could we just contextualize that for the audience? What should they expect in that program, and who is it kind of intended for?
Sure. The MS program is fundamentally, in many ways, upholds the standards of our more than 100-year-old MS degree, but it has evolved over time, just as our industry has. And there are various ways in which you can take this program according to how those changes have occurred and your particular interests, whether that be broadcast, including podcasting, or investigative data, skills, or documentary for that matter. So it is the type of program that you want to investigate very closely in order to understand who our faculty are, how our classes are arranged. There's lots of information about the order in which students take these required courses, and I guess you can refer to them as electives. We sometimes call them seminar and production classes, or classes that we refer to as image and sound, which is a very broad sounding category that includes video, audio, data, and photography. And these are the types of choices you make as you go along. But as is our tradition, we also fundamentally rely on our reporting and writing classes. Those are the very first things that you take, no matter if you have 15 years of experience or have never written a news story in your life. It is always fascinating to me that in our small group classes, which are usually no more than 16 or so per professor and adjunct, students learn to forget what they know about good writing and good reporting, and come out of these classes, these initial modules, with a much stronger grasp, not only of how to gather facts and interviews, but how to deal with the various challenges that something like a pandemic might produce, or something like a change in the way people identify their gender, How does one deal with issues of privacy and the like? And all of these questions come up and are addressed as students use New York City as their laboratory during those initial classes, and then during the rest of their time. When they finish those fundamental classes, they then begin to craft a curriculum of their own. Now, if you apply to the Stabile program or the documentary program or the data program, you're going to be prescribed a certain number of classes to take to satisfy the requirements of our degree. But even if you are a general MS student, you can still cultivate a deeper knowledge in the areas that I mentioned before, such as, writing for the ear or doing videos, short videos, long videos. And then you can also take a deeper dive in the spring semesters, in particular, when you take what we refer to as seminar and production classes. These are specialized classes that may be categorized by subject area, such as covering healthcare, sports reporting, or writing about religion, race, or they may be focused around a particular platform, such as audio storytelling or, covering covering the city, but with video, or some combination of that. And you also will take fundamental classes that we refer to as journalism essentials, and these include lecture and reading classes with terrific speakers about the law and ethics. These are essentials for obvious reasons. You need to learn in a digital age what copyright means, what privacy means. Is social media private? Is it public? How not to get sued for libel, how to navigate all of the pitfalls of protecting your rights as a journalist. What is the shield law, et cetera. And I know that I've seen our graduates have to test out these principles when they go out into the field. And so it's the type of class that, you take in concert with your reporting here and hopefully carry with you. The ethics class also deals with a great number of issues that we grapple with every day, the kinds of things that you might get guidance on in a newsroom from your standards and practices editor, or from an attorney or from an editor. And I can say, from having done this program myself, there's nothing better than to be in your very first newsroom after completing the MS degree and calling a mentor, probably your reporting professor, and asking them a question that you might not want to ask your editor out of fear of looking stupid, and getting, some guidance on that. The idea of our MS degree program in this professional graduate school isn't necessarily all about what you learn in the classroom, but what you take with you for the rest of your working life. So in addition to the coursework, in addition to the field work of reporting and interviewing, recording in the city of New York City, you also get a great deal of guidance from a team of professionals in our career development office. You may be going to class one day and then a session on how to write a killer cover letter. You will be asked, cajoled, pushed to have your resume looked at and taken apart by our fabulous team in that office, which you'll hear about more in a moment. And frankly, I consider that very much part of the educational process here. And what's even better is that is a service that remains with you as long as you are an alumnus of our school, which is a wonderful part of this investment and looking long-term about your future in this industry. I will say one thing, that a third variety of this MS degree, if you will, beyond the various options that you have as a full-time student, is to take these requirements instead of in 10 months, to stretch that over 2 years or 5 semesters. That's referred to as the part-time program. That's the program that I run and that I graduated from myself. And I can get into a little more detail about how that works. We do have some breakdowns of the curriculum, but keep in mind that it is the very same MS degree that any one of our graduates who receive their diplomas receive. And even if you are not a Stabile student or documentary student or data student, which part-timers generally are not or will not be, you can still take investigative classes. You can still take video classes and classes in audio. You can do a terrific master's project that is entirely in audio, very much in the style of This American Life, as your master's project in your second summer. But one of the advantages of being a part-time student, if I can make a quick plug for it, is that you get the benefit of all the rights and privileges of student status once again. All those little perks we sort of took for granted in college and didn't take advantage of that make you eligible for a great number of things, from internships and scholarships to fellowships. And again, the Career Development Office can talk to you about some of those things. But it's really nice. This is one of the beauties of graduate school, and particularly in Columbia University in the city of New York, that you can have a chance to set this path, this professional path for yourself with all the knowledge that you've brought from your undergraduate degrees, your life, and what we've all learned in the last several years in this country and beyond about engaging in our society in a meaningful way, and doing so with a platform and a voice and the ability to make change.
Great, thank you, Elena. And you mentioned there are 2 specializations within the MS itself, the Stabile investigative specialization for people who want to really focus on investigative journalism and do accountability reporting and expose wrongdoing through that lens, and also a documentary specialization, which is a 3-semester program for people who really want to focus on creating documentaries, nonfiction, of course, reported documentaries at the highest level in that program. But the nice thing about the broader MS, either the full-time or the part-time, is that even if you have interests like audio, magazine writing, broadcast journalism, you can explore that without necessarily having to apply specifically to that kind of track in our program. You can really explore those different avenues within the degree program as you go through it. We don't require you to kind of already decide exactly what you want to pursue. When you come into the MS, you can explore it and maybe make some new decisions that you didn't think you would in terms of choosing paths that maybe you hadn't sought out when you began the program, but learned about as you were here. So it's very flexible too, which is great. And so I'd like to ask Jonathan Soma, our professor in the data program, to explain a bit about our 2 other programs within the MS that are focused more on data and computational work. First, I'll ask about the MS in Data Journalism program. Soma, could you tell us a bit about what that program does and what kind of training it provides for students?
Sure, yeah. I might actually steal both of the programs so I can compare them for the students right now. So I'm gonna actually switch it around. So we have 2 different programs. One is a dual degree in computer science and journalism, and one of them is the data journalism master's degree. So the first one, the dual degree program, is done with the engineering school here at Columbia, where you get a journalism degree and you get a computer science degree at the same time. So both master's degrees. This is generally for folks who have maybe a computer science undergrad. Maybe you've been working in the field of CS. It's for folks who have some CS experience, and then you come through and you're generally folks there go on to really anything. They're the people who are kind of deciding the future of how news works. They're writing the algorithms, they're programming the news feeds, all that kind of stuff. On the other side, we have the data journalism master's degree. And so that lives just within the J School. It's longer than the normal MS program. It's 3 semesters long. And during the course of this program, you get all of the normal, wonderful, delightful journalism stuff that comes out of the J School, but you also get schooled in Python and databases and scraping and all of that programming stuff that data journalists need. The biggest question I have when I talk to potential applicants to the program is they're like, what is data journalism? So I'll just say, the program is focused on, let's say, if you were a normal person, you would interview a person in order to get information for a story. But as a data journalist, you're interviewing spreadsheets, you're interviewing data sets, you're interviewing databases, all kinds of other things like that that get a little more technical. Maybe you're visualizing data, maybe you're just using it in pursuit of an investigation, but anything that might involve, let's say, numbers, a lot of PDFs, anything like that, we can file that one under data journalism.
Well, and just to clarify, for the data journalism degree, do you have to have a background in data to be able to potentially pursue that degree?
That's the most important question, and that was why I tried to put those two next to each other, and I totally forgot. So thank you for this. Yeah, the most important thing about this program is you don't need to know anything coming in. I say if you can turn on your computer, you're good to go. I think that if you have all successfully joined this Zoom, you would be fine in the data journalism MS. If you have experience, that's fine. You know, we'll take you to a higher level. But if, you know, you don't even know what Excel is, that's also fine because we do start from zero.
Great. And to clarify too, if people are interested in, say, data visualization or those kinds of things, would you be a good fit for the program? Or what would you say about what you should be interested in really pursuing during the course of this program? I know like a lot of reporting that you'll be doing, as you explained, will be data focused. So should you be interested in reporting with data primarily for that kind of program?
Yeah, so because we are a journalism school that prides itself on the journalism aspects of things, typically what you're going to be doing is working with data in pursuit of some sort of story. You're going to be analyzing data. It's really, in a real newsroom, like 90% of your time is spent fighting your data, tackling your data, doing your analysis. And then there's a very little bit that is the visualization part. So we do definitely do visualization. Presentation is important, but you can think of it more as kind of more akin to like investigative. You know, we're not a design school. What we're here to do is research stories, write stories, and put something great together that readers will want to see.
Great. And for the dual degree with computer science, that's more of a program, as you explained, for people who have that background in computer science and can really hit the ground running at the graduate level, because a lot of the curriculum is split between our school and the School of Engineering's Department of Computer Science. So you're doing machine learning and all these kind of high-level computational classes over there. And for the most part, I think a lot of students in that program are going on to do, develop apps and software for newsrooms. Is that correct in terms of where, your goals should be?
Yeah, a lot of the time they end up more on what we call the product side. So they're working with, huge streams of data coming in to figure out how to get people to subscribe to the New York Times. So they're figuring out how to push all the data out to all the apps. Things that are a little less on the necessarily reporting side. They're mostly doing more CS-y things with the journalism flavor. But yes, for that program, you do need strong computer science fundamentals, because half of your program is in the engineering school at a master's level. So if you want to do computer stuff and journalism, but you don't have a background in computer science, 100% the data journalism MS. If you do have a foundation in computer science, then we can, you can chat with us and we can figure out what the best idea is for you.
Perfect. Yeah, I know a lot of the dual degree students have gone on to do, great R&D work in places like the Washington Post and the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. And so they're really helping create, new products that can help consumers consume news in more, engaging ways, and also reporters gather news and make sense of, lots of complex things with different software now. So it's a really cool program for that inclination if you have it. But yeah, no, talking about all the MS programs that we've gone over, we've talked about full-time, part-time, the data degree, the dual degree with computer science, the different specializations in investigative and documentary. No matter what MS you're in, you're going to start your program with the reporting module, which is a class that sends you into New York City to do a lot of reporting. And I'd like to welcome Professor Rita Omokha, who just finished teaching with Lisa Belkin a section of the reporting module this fall, and ask Rita a bit about what her class was doing in terms of assignments and how they kind of structure that class to give that experience to the students.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So the purpose of the reporting class is to teach students the fundamentals of being a reporter, right? It doesn't matter if you want to go into broadcasting or podcasting or feature news or just straight news writing, you still have to understand what goes into that toolbox, that arsenal of sorts of what it takes to be a reporter. So the core class, this reporting core class, teaches students some of the things like, how do I ask the right questions and what are those right questions, right? Like that core fundamental of what it takes to be a journalist. So in our class, we have each student start their writing assignment with a pitch. And this is where I really want to narrow in with the student, what is your argument? What is this story about? And how are you going to build out that story? And key things like, if your story is about high school basketball teams, I don't know, I just made that up. I'm going to ask the student, so what kinds of sources are you going to need for this story? Fundamental question, right? Are you going to need to speak to the basketball coach, to students, to athletes, right? So really getting students to think about, what do I need to build this argument? Who are the people do I need to talk to? I'm really getting students comfortable being uncomfortable. The idea too is to send students out into New York City and go talk to strangers. That thing that your parents and your guardian tells you not to do, we want you to do. But seriously, that's how you get comfortable being uncomfortable, is just doing it. And so we have students do it over and over and over again. But the biggest part too is, after you have all this reportage, how do you sit down and make sure you're writing a digestible and accessible piece of writing? Because that's the point. If you've done all that reportage and the end user, the reader, I should say, cannot understand what the argument is, you've kind of failed at your job. So we want to make sure students get to that comfort level of doing that, so that they have a piece of writing that can live in the real world. In our class, we have students do 4 assignments: a feature story, a profile, a trend news piece, and a group project. The group project was really fun. So we're in New York City, and in the past year and a half, New York City has transitioned, and the full dynamic of what it is to be in New York has changed, because a lot of restaurants were physically forced to move out into the streets to become financially viable in this pandemic. So we sent students to different parts of the cities to talk to restaurant owners, talk to locals, talk to patrons about what this shift did to them. For the restaurant owners, do they have to spend a whole lot of money just to remain financially viable? To restaurant patrons, what does that feel like for them too? And for locals, did that change the dynamic of being in their neighborhood? Did street parking all of a sudden disappear? So all of these things that we did was an effort to make sure that students, again, continually get comfortable being uncomfortable. A lot of times I would tell students, don't just stick to the same kinds of stories because you like talking about art. Why not try a hard news piece? Because this is also helping them expand the portfolio. You're in the class for 7 weeks, and these are quick turnaround stories. So I want to make sure that students have a good portfolio when they start applying for internships, which is a big part of the program, is getting you hired at the end of your program. So I usually used to push students to make sure that they're thinking outside of their comfort zone too, and making sure that in the end, you leave the class with more confidence than what you came in with.
Thanks, Rita. And happily, we have a current student in the MS program, Samantha Chaney, with us today, who was a member of Rita and Lisa Belkin's reporting section. I'd like to ask Samantha a little bit about her experience in the program so far through the reporting class, what it's been like to do these assignments that Rita was talking about.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Just like going off of what Rita said, we definitely became comfortable with being uncomfortable. Just going out into the street of New York City and talking to people that we didn't know. A lot of people in the class, they didn't have any background experience in journalism. I did study journalism in undergrad, but it was a completely different experience, just, being in such a big place like New York City and being, forced to go out every day pretty much to report, and really finding a story in everything and everywhere that you go. Like Rita said, we were tasked with pitching 3 stories like every week or every other week. So a lot of the time we would be pitching stories and we think they were amazing and we'd find out they weren't amazing. So just going out and kind of living, but also asking questions everywhere that we're going. And I think that being in New York it was kind of easy to stay like close to Columbia and in this area, but Rita definitely challenged me to expand my thought process and going to different boroughs. So I did a story in Harlem, in the Bronx, and in Brooklyn. So you get your exercise, definitely you're on the train going back and forth, and then you're reporting and you'll turn in a first draft and then you're going back to ask more questions. So just being open to going around and asking new questions. And then definitely, as she mentioned, the structuring of the story, because for me, it's easy to talk to people and to, get information out of people. But then I definitely had to develop my structuring skill. And Rita definitely helped me with that. Because I didn't have so much of that training from undergrad. So building off of what she was teaching me every week and what Lisa was teaching me, and being able to, come out with clips or pieces that I actually was proud of. And so, yeah, it's been a big learning process, and I've really enjoyed it so far. We just finished up the reporting section about 2 weeks ago. So yeah, now we're using kind of what we learned in the reporting process to now going to the writing module.
Great. And I'm going to put in the chat for everyone to look at. There's a story, Samantha, that you were able to publish in CNN about barbershops and how they're dealing with kind of the aftermath of COVID, and COVID kind of still is part of our life. And I'd like to ask a bit about how that story came about. What was the origin of that, and what was the process like working with Rita on that, and then getting it pitched successfully to CNN?
Okay, so I think when I first entered the class, I never really thought about those things that I was writing were going to get published. Rita really kind of told us, like, we need to come in and write and try to develop our skill, and then if that happens to happen in the process of getting it published, then that's great. But really writing pieces that we're proud of and that are really building on these foundational aspects that we're learning here. And so just going out into the street, I met Linwood Dillard, also known as the Barber Guy, and I really was able to identify that he is a real interesting guy and a real interesting character. And so I was like, oh yeah, this has to be a story. And that just came from me walking around in Harlem and seeing that he had this bus, and that he was cutting hair on this bus, and there were other stories that after I started researching him and everything, that people wrote stories about him in this barbershop. But Rita definitely was like, what's the angle here? She really challenged me and always saying like, so what? So I would come to her with pitches every week and she'd be like, okay, so what? Why does that matter? Why do I care? And so kind of taking a story that may have already been out in the world somewhere about this person and putting the so what of why does it matter right now? Why do people care? And yeah, so that's how I came up with this story idea with Rita's help, and getting it into CNN. It kind of just fell together. Like I said, I didn't really initially think that it was going to go anywhere, but Rita was definitely dedicated to making sure that when we had a piece that was good or that was reported well, that we, send it out and see if anyone was interested. And so she did contact people with Essence, and I also talked to some people from New York Magazine and then CNN Style. And so we kind of just had a phone conversation, like me and Rita would talk on the phone. So if you guys are interested in your reporting professors, it's not really like an undergrad where this is just your professor. It's really like an editor relationship. And so I would call Rita, text her all throughout the day. Like we would really be in constant communication. And she, came to me and she said like, okay, these are some people, different publications that are interested in the story. And what do you want to do? So that was really nice just to have that option of, there were different publications and where did I think it fit best, and where could I tell my story and the story that, and the publication that would fit with the people that I was talking about. And so we thought that CNN had the best or the most international audience, and that would be a platform that would really be able to tell the story. And so we went through the editing process with them, and yeah, it just worked out that way. But like I said, we didn't really go in to the class thinking like, okay, I'm gonna publish somewhere. It's more like, if you are doing what you need to do, and if you're reporting and it's done well, then it kind of just happens that way.
Okay, thanks, Samantha. And Rita, could maybe you shed some more light on how you work with Samantha and other students, who want to potentially, do great reporting for the class, of course, but then also maybe take that out and get that shared with a larger audience, like in this case on CNN, how you have those conversations or how you think about that with your class.
Yeah. So just to preface all of that, so I am a full-time freelance writer. So a lot of times my ears and my eyes are always looking for that next big story. So when the students were submitting their pitches, that's exactly how I looked at the pitches. What can survive in the real world? I'm never trying to change who they are or change their story ideas. So every week when I will read through the 3 pitches from each student, sometimes I'll go to the very last idea because it was the most with the biggest national appeal. And so again, through the outlining process, I'm pushing them to get more information. I'm pushing them to get more expert voices, to get just more into the story, to bolster the argument so that it can have bigger legs, as I call it, in the real world. But again, as Sam mentioned, it was never the idea to say every story has to be pitched outside. Is, do you like this story? Are you excited to report on this story? If so, when I see the first draft and I see that there is something there, I will push them and say, well, what about this? What about adding this voice here? How about getting another barber into this story or another hairstylist into the story? All of that in my mind is to take it out into the real world, only if they wanted to. I'm never saying you have to publish this outside. No, it was just a part to challenge them a bit more. So once I see a story I really feel passionately about, and they too feel excited to report out, I'll definitely challenge them to just do more reporting. One of our students, Molly Hirsch, got published into Teen Vogue. And with her, I had her do so much more reporting. I mean, call the mayor, call the state senators, do more, because I did see that it was an important story that I have not seen nationally done by anyone. So I really wanted her to go all out, and she did, and it got published. So that's my thought process when I look at the pitches and I start to see their initial drafts, is pushing them and challenge them to do more if they want to. There were times where students were done with the work and I said, well, if you do just a little bit more reporting, we can push it out into the real world. And that was my thought process.
Great. And I know, the reporting class has really been a fundamental part of the MS program for decades. So alumni from all over the world always will have memories from being in that class. And I know both Elena and Rita, you're both alumni of the MS program. Do you have any particular memories of your experience doing reporting, starting the program with that experience?
Elena, you can go first. I talked a lot.
Thank you, Rita, and congratulations on all your success as well. It's been wonderful to see all of the things that you've achieved, and so soon after graduating. When I was in the program, it was the late 1990s, and there was no Google Maps, there was not a lot of technology to guide you through the process of reporting, navigating New York City, and finding the right editors. But it still worked, and the wonderful part of it is that it worked because the work spoke for itself. I always like to say that what drew me to journalism was that it's like as close to a perfect meritocracy as you can get, in the sense that, you can't schmooze your way through it. You actually have to deliver the goods. You have to have a really deeply reported story with multiple sources, with thoughtful reporting and a lot of shoe leather. But as an aside, I always tell people, don't get it twisted. It's like any other business where who it matters. And who we know are some of the best editors and reporters at some of the best news organizations all over the world. So that certainly helps. But what I felt was a great advantage to me as someone who thought I was a pretty decent writer, but needed, I guess, what I would call a writing coach to push me, to tear apart the writing, and to encourage me to not just freelance something, but to aim high. So something along the lines of the CNN, something along the lines of Vibe magazine, where I sold one of my magazine articles about a young boxer who was trying to take women's boxing to the Olympics back in the mid-90s. And that sort of thing made all the difference for me as opposed to trying to do this on my own. Nowadays, there's so many ways in which we bring our network to the fore to help students publish their work. And part of those involve, for example, the postgraduate fellowships in which students can apply to, in many ways, extend their training with us in-house, in collaboration with terrific editors and news organizations, nonprofit investigative news outlets, in a way that can help launch their careers. And my favorite thing to say about that is that the wonder of that experience is that instead of paying us, we pay you. But that trajectory, the idea that when you get in the door, you have the help, you have the connections, but more importantly, you have that person saying, oh my gosh, that's terrific work. Let's do something with it. Let's not let it sit in your computer. There's no worse feeling as a journalist than to have discovered a wonderful story that no one else has, only to see it, some other person do it, and maybe not as well, and so, you have that feeling of being moved from, point A to point B in an upward motion, and not in a lateral motion, and certainly not backwards. And that makes all the difference.
Yeah, for me, my experience, I just graduated last May. And before coming to the J School, I was in corporate, in business, I should say, for about 10 years. So I did digital media with CNN, NBC, and Viacom. And so I was transitioning as an older student too, to a new career. And my first class was reporting. And in my opinion, I had one of the best reporting professors at the school, Paula Spann. I still call her and text her to this day because she is incredible. She's like my writing mom. She's my mentor. She's everything. And I truly believe, and I tell this to her all the time, and she hates when I say this, but I truly believe that all of my successes and who I am as a writer today is because of that one class. She was just great. And she really changed a lot of what I thought I could do or could not do. I had a lot of insecurities, a lot of anxieties of what am I doing right now? I left a 6-figure job to do writing. Am I insane? But I loved it. It was my passion. I wanted to be a storyteller for a long time, but I couldn't because of some financial and family issues. And Paula Spann was the difference for me. And why I stayed at the school, because there were some times I was really challenged and wasn't sure I can continue, but Paula, her editing skills and just who she was as a person and a mentor really encouraged me to stay in the program. Even after I left her class, I would still email her my writings and say, hey, I have this new professor who I love, but can you just look at this and see if the editing is okay? I was just that stuck on her because she changed so much of what I believed about myself. And that's the beauty about Columbia, is that there are a lot of amazing professors who are so dedicated to your growth. Even after I graduated, a lot of professors and deans are still so invested in my career to make sure that I'm successful and encouraging me, promoting my work, just doing all the things that I personally think I needed to bolster my confidence. There's still moments where I still doubt myself and had those anxiety moments. I don't think that ever goes away, personally, I should say. So knowing that I have people like Paula Spann in my corner, knowing that I have deans who are dedicated to me and my success has been tremendous and profoundly changed my career trajectory.
Thanks, Rita. And so after the reporting class finishes, just to demystify the MS program, now we still have more of our fall semester to go after that class completes. And right now for MS students in the broader program, you have a written word class and an image and sound class, as Elena mentioned earlier. Thought I'd ask Samantha what particular classes you're taking within those modules. I know they just began, so you can't give us a full report on them, but just a taste of what those classes are.
Yes, so when I first came to Columbia, I was really interested in, my long-term goal, I guess, would be to be an on-air broadcast reporter. So I knew I wanted to take a video course here. And so I just started that video module. I'm actually here right now from 9 to 5. And so the funny thing is, though, I thought I would do more on-air work, but this class is really teaching me how to tell stories without including myself, which I think is very important because the story is not about me. So I've really been challenged to tell the story without any narration, without any stand-ups, and just really diving into telling a story based on the character itself, who they are, and finding other ways to tell stories. So that's been really interesting. And then I'm also taking a feature writing class. I've only been in the class for about 2 weeks, like you mentioned. So I'm really getting used to just the transition from reporting with Rita and into these new classes. And like Rita mentioned, I still text her, even though I'm not in her class anymore. I just text her last night. So it's like, once you go into new classes, you're still gonna definitely have that support from your reporting professors or whatever classes that you do take. And, moving forward, just taking what they did teach you and putting that into the new classes.
Great. And, it's a very fast-paced program if you're in the full-time broader MS. So soon, I think Samantha will be deciding what classes to take in the spring, the 2 seminar and production classes, which Elena mentioned. You're going to have a wide menu of options, whether it's broadcast classes or writing classes or specific beats like covering politics or covering climate or covering race. I thought I'd ask Rita, since you are a recent graduate, what classes you took when you had those opportunities in front of you and what that that experience was like.
Yeah, so the school has 2 seminars that you have to apply to get into once you're in the school. So those are the 2 that I did get into. The first one is book writing and the other one is covering religion. For book writing, I wanted to do long form writing since forever. So that was a no-brainer for me. And book writing, basically you walk away with a book proposal. That's the idea. And to get into the class, you have to have a proposal of the book, right? A very short, I think 1 paragraph pitch to enter the class. And mine was about my immigrant story with my mom and my brothers, long story. And got into the class and walked away with a book proposal. And right now, actually in the process of writing a book. So that was really successful. I'm really grateful for that class. And Sam Friedman, again, another Paula's fan for me, really changed my life. Still call and text him to this day. And he's really invested in my career. He's making sure I'm not being railroaded with any agents or any publishers, and making sure that I'm making the right decisions in my book writing career. For covering religion, I've always been fascinated with religion and knowing how to write and talk about religion in a sensitive manner. And in that class, I wanted to focus on Native Americans. As an immigrant to this country, I'm from Nigeria. I've always been fascinated by the idea of the other. And I feel like the indigenous group in this country, they are like the other of the others, a very compounded, fascinating demographic to look into. So I wanted to specifically write only about indigenous people and how they have this relationship with Mother Earth. I know it's very different, but that was something that really fascinated me. And I did that. And the one thing Ari Goldman, who was the teacher for that class, taught us, which applies to just how I am as a reporter today, is having, again, that sensitivity in how you're reporting with religions. And he calls it objective empathy, knowing how to talk to people and kind of silencing your own biases, which everyone thinks, oh yeah, I'm very objective, but we're not. We all have our biases. And that is the biggest takeaway that I took from that class, about having objective empathy. So yeah, those are the 2 classes I took, and still taking the lessons I learned from those classes and applying it to my work today.
Great, thank you, Rita. And for people with an interest in more data or computational journalism courses, Soma, could you tell us a bit about some of the opportunities we might have for them within the MS, either the data program itself or in the broader MS?
Sure, yeah. So for the data program, you're taking at least 2 required classes every semester that are programming focused. The first semester, we teach you a lot of Python, a lot of data wrangling. Second semester, we move on to building projects using your programming skills. Maybe we poke you with a little bit of machine learning. And then in the final semester, you can kind of choose your own adventure about what direction you take your skills in, whether it's a more visual direction, whether it's mapping, different things like that. But for the general MS, we also have classes you can take that are either required or are optional that are focused on data. So your investigative techniques class, which we'll take in the fall, has a data component, but it's not the main gist of the class. It's just the idea that when you're investigating things, data becomes important. Along with that, you can take a class called Data 1, which is much more focused on data start to finish. It's not quite to the level that people in the data journalism MS will, kind of approach data, but it's a really solid foundation that you can use in the rest of your reporting career. After that second semester, when you have your electives, there are plenty of classes that are focused on data along with some sort of reporting specialty. So for example, reporting on data focused on healthcare, reporting on data focused on cross-border investigations, reporting on data or working with data, reporting on, let's say, criminal justice. So there are plenty of options to kind of, leave the door open to be a general MS student and also have all these data classes without actually committing yourself to the data specialization.
Thanks, Soma. And then to wrap up our discussion about the MS programs, I thought I'd ask all of our panelists for this portion, Elena, Soma, Rita, and Samantha, as either successful applicants who have come to the school or as faculty members, what do you think stands out in a successful application to this school for people who might be watching this now and thinking about, ooh, I'd like to apply? What should they think about in terms of how they should formulate their application to stand out when they're coming through the application committee process?
I'd say, as someone who just went through the process a year ago, I think that oftentimes we get wrapped up in writing essays about what we think admissions panels or boards want to hear. And while I think you should definitely obviously submit your best work and put your best foot forward, you should really be your authentic self when writing your essays. I know when I was writing the essays, I think there's a personal essay and then I don't remember the other one, but I know you have to write something, a professional, Write something that's close to your heart. For me, that was important. And as an African-American woman coming into this school, I went to an HBCU before this. I wanted to really show who I am in my essay and really, represent the life that I come from before this. And so I think that really reflects now in the writing that I'm doing here and the kind of stories that I'm telling and the people that I'm speaking with on a day-to-day basis. I think you definitely want to be yourself and don't just write something that you think schools want to hear. Write what you really feel is important to you, and that will kind of lead you through the process of writing what's important to you when you actually get here.
Thank you.
I would just add that I think it's important to really do your homework in terms of knowing who we are, what we do, the professors that you'd like to work with. Spend some time sort of studying them. The website is very good at showing you who they are, where they come from, and what classes they teach. So that's important to know, and just to echo what Samantha said, this application is a wonderful experience, and you might not normally think that, having probably filled out applications for admission to various other institutions. But for example, we don't require the GRE because we don't believe that that's a good measurement of whether or not you can do this work. We have our own writing test. But when you fill out those, when you write those essays, the personal essay and the professional essay, you don't regurgitate what's in your resume because we already ask you for that. What we're generally asking you is, who are you and what's been leading you to us? So it's a exercise in self-exploration, a wonderful way to kind of ask yourself, what is it about my background, my love of storytelling, the people who have influenced me the most, the experiences that I've had that have brought me to the doorstep of this school, and what really matters. So remember that the people who read this application are our faculty. They are experienced journalists and editors who love a good, well-told story. So don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Tell us in a very genuine way who you are and what it is you're looking for.
I'll just go ahead.
Sorry. I personally love the personal essays, as everyone else has been saying. But I think an important thing for the data program is don't discount yourself because you think you're not a math person, you're not someone who's computational, or like you took a class in college and it was about programming and it was miserable and you were miserable and your grade was miserable. Like I'm someone who, I took a stats class in college and I got a D. because it was just so boring and so not applied. And it's just like, why was I learning statistics? So I could, do poorly on an exam, I guess. Whereas when you're coming into a program here, all of the things that you're doing here are in pursuit of journalism. They're in pursuit of actually doing things and creating things and making things. And I think that it is very different from much of the way that you have probably learned historically. And so don't discount yourself or your abilities if you are looking at a specialization because you say, I'm not good enough to do this. I don't have the experience to do this. That's what we're here for. That's what you're going to school for, right? Like, we are here to teach you how to do all of these things so that then you can do them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just quickly add, it's really important that you're intentional in why you're applying to Columbia. There are many J schools out there in the world, and I think it's important for you to sit down with that thought too and saying, why am I applying to Columbia? What do I hope to get out of that experience? And really meditate on that, because it's a personal experience that sometimes is very daunting and can be stressful. So I would say definitely be intentional and know why you're choosing Columbia and kind of express that through your different essays and how you're putting your effort into the application.
Thank you, Rita. And thank you, everyone. That's wonderful advice about the application process. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists who talked about our MS programs. And now we're going to move on and talk about the Master of Arts program, which I know is a program that sounds kind of similar, Master of Arts, Master of Science. But I'd like to welcome Professor Nicholas Lemann, who is our Dean Emeritus at the school, to talk a bit about the MA program and what that is and how that differs from the MS and what kind of students it's ideally suited for.
Okay, thanks, Ross, and hi, everybody. As Ross said, my name is Nick Lemann. I've been here at the journalism school for, I guess this is my 19th year. I'm also a journalist while teaching here, and I do long-form journalism for various publications, mostly the New Yorker. So, the MA program is about 15 years old, and we started it, honestly, one of the selling points of the school is that it's only a one-year course to degree. Many of us on the faculty wish we could have more time with you because there's so much to teach, but we recognize there's a whole bunch of reasons to keep it to 1 year. So, originally, we designed the MA program to be an optional second year after the MS program. It's evolved into an entirely separate program that gets a different group of people. So the MA program is for people who they're what I would call late, early career journalists. It's a very international group. Americans are always in the minority. It's about, this year's the biggest cohort we've ever had, which is what, Ross, 50 something?
A little around 55, I think. 50, around
yeah.
there. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's a small and intimate program where you get to know everybody in the program very well. And the idea is that we don't have the basic intro reporting cycle and sort of orientation to journalism that the MS program has, because we assume that students coming into the MA program have that already. So, as a test, if I say there's a good old-fashioned breaking news story, a 3-alarm fire, and I need you to go cover it, and it's lunchtime and you need to go on site and cover it and file a story by dinner time. If you hear that and think, oh my God, then MS is better because by the time you finish that program, you will know how to do that for sure. That's kind of foundational. And if you think, I don't need to repeat that because that's what I've been doing, the MA program is more designed for you. So what the MA program does is it's organized by these very broad subject areas. It's designed to be platform agnostic. So you apply into one of 4 majors, which are politics, where I teach, arts and culture, science, which tends to have a heavy environmental and tech focus, and business and economics. What we try to do is, and a lot of this program is designed around what I wish I had known when I had started out in journalism, but I didn't, so I stumbled around and got things wrong too much. A lot of journalists who know how to do the basic skills of reporting and writing a story are intimidated by both longer form journalism, in either writing, video, or another format, but also by substantively complex topics. So if I said to you, okay, you're good with the 3-alarm fire, but what about the Federal Reserve paring back its bond buying program? A lot of journalists and people who went to the MS program would say, well, I don't really understand that. So what we try to do in the MA program is sort of get you over that hurdle and build a sort of expertise and confidence to engage with complicated subjects, learn how to have empowered interactions with experts, and without in any way departing from journalism. So you would be aiming to do journalism that is deals with these complicated subjects, but is not aimed at experts and is fun to read and is written or filmed as a story. So that's the basic idea. You come into one of these 4 majors. Each major has its own cohort. So the cohorts are like your friends for life because they're small and you get to know each other very, very well. There's a couple of courses that everybody takes, including one that I teach called Evidence and Inference. And then in a way, the heart of the program is really 2 things. One is a year-long seminar in your discipline where you're with the same group and one professor in the fall, one professor in the spring. You're in the classroom with these people for 6 hours a week. So it's, really deep stuff in your subject area. And the other is the thesis, which is, I think officially 8,000 words, but, many have been longer. And in normal times, which are sort of kind of returning, many or most of them are done all over the world. We have some considerable funding to help with that. So we've had, you name it in the world, we've had thesis projects done from there. And they're really amazing in terms of the level of ambition and the level of execution. And quite a few have ended up being published in altered form as books or documentaries and so on. And, the MA grads, now that we've been doing it for so long, are a wonderful cohort that are scattered all over the world doing amazing stuff. Just at news organizations all over the world in all media. Some of them have done fantastic startups, like the best magazine in India is a nest of MA grads, and some of them have jobs as foreign correspondents for the New York Times or the Washington Post. The poster child of the moment, I don't know if you all have seen the Facebook files in Wall Street Journal that sort of set the world on fire. The lead author of that is an MA grad named Jeff Horowitz. So that's the basics of what the program is. And, I don't know if you want to add, Ross, or anybody else, or you all want to ask questions. I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, as an alum, I'm an alum of the MA program myself. I was in the arts and culture concentration. So I had a wonderful experience. As Nick explained, you really have a really intimate cohort and you have a great learning experience and really push yourself to do journalism at levels you didn't think you could do it at, really. But one thing I should mention too is the really cool experience to take 3 subject area classes outside of the journalism school while you're at Columbia. So you can take advantage of all the resources at the university, whether it's the classes for me in the School of the Arts, where I took film classes and theater literature and English classes. Other students in the politics track could obviously go to the School of International and Public Affairs or to the Political Science Department or anthropology or sociology or history. So you get to learn from both these great faculty in the journalism school, but also from these great other experts and professors in other disciplines to really deepen the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and often people choose these courses in support of their thesis project. So inside the journalism school, your advisor sort of tells you how to do the storytelling part. And if your story is on, Korea, you can take a course on Korea and get deeper on the substance. But people take all sorts of courses, and we've been amazingly successful about opening doors all around the university. So it's not 100% access, but it's pretty close to 100% access.
Right. And the great thing in the arts and culture track was that I had a couple professors come in. Oftentimes in the seminars, whether you're in politics or science or arts and culture, you'll have faculty from other departments come and present, issues and topics with your seminar. And sometimes in the fall, if you really find something really interesting, you might be able to take a course with that faculty member who came in the spring and really get a full, semester's worth of knowledge from them too. So you can really, learn a lot over the fall and learn kind of what you want to deepen your knowledge about during the spring from that too. So it's a really great experience to kind of sample a lot of the great minds at the school. So great. I think at this point, we will move it over to our Director of Career Development, Gina Boubion. And then at the end, I can answer questions. And then Nick, if you have time, you can answer questions in the post-career development chat that Gina will present. And we can answer any questions you might have about the MA at that point. But for now, I'll move it over to Gina, and we'll talk a bit about what people might be doing after they finish the program. Nick mentioned these great trajectories of people from the MA. We'll talk about MA and MS grads and what they're doing now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can I be heard? Okay. I'm going to share a screen because I've got a PowerPoint to share with you. So I am part of the career development team here at Columbia, and I'm delighted to talk to you today about careers in journalism and specifically the careers of our students. Our team will guide you from day one so that you can be competitive in the job market. So first, a reality check. There's no guarantee of a job after graduation. We don't know what the journalism job market is going to look like in May 2022 or May 2023. We don't know which companies will be hiring. We don't know which companies will lay off staff and possibly even close. There will definitely be new companies that emerge and launch successfully. There will be new job descriptions that we can't anticipate in the digital space, in audio, and other platforms. But so regardless of the incredible flux that sort of typifies the journalism industry in recent decades, regardless of what's going on in the general economy, Columbia grads do really well in the job market, in the journalism job market, in the months and the years after graduation. So I'm going to share with you some statistics on the class of 2021, so you can get a bigger picture of how our students fare and what these figures might tell us about the journalism industry in general. So as of August 31st, with 94% of the class of 2021 in the data set, 76% of the class of 2021 had plans lined up. And we define plans, employment plans, as jobs, paid internships, further academic schooling, and freelance careers. And these numbers do tick up all summer and all fall long as graduates let us know that they've found that first position after J school. Just in the last couple of weeks, we heard from May and August grads whose internships had transitioned into full-time jobs, and who August grads who were landing their first internship and full-time job. So for approximately the last 10 years, we've seen this employment rate range from 71 to 77%. And there was one notable exception, which I do need to address. The class of 2020, last year's class, which graduated into the height of the pandemic, internship programs and fellowship programs were being canceled and job offers were being retracted. And I'm sure those of you watching are familiar with this, and it may have even happened to you. So that last year was pretty discouraging for the class of 2020, and only about 60% of them had something lined up at graduation. And so with them sort of taken out of the range, we really have seen this very consistent range from 71 to 77% within a couple weeks of graduation. And as I said, those numbers tick up for every week of the summer. So this is this more transparency, because we like to be really straightforward. So as I said, 77% of the class, or 76% of the class of 2021 had plans lined up by August of 2021. That's 165 students out of 218 students total. It was a smaller class than we usually have. And this includes the May and the August grads. So with the May grads, obviously at a higher rate, more like 82 to 84% employed in this, and the August grads coming in around 65%. Again, these numbers have ticked up, and these are all the various categories that you're seeing. The discrepancy between the August grads and the May grads is not a surprise. It's expected. And like I said, we are continuing to hear from the August grads that they have found that first position. So what stands out when you look at this pie chart? I hope it's the large blue slice on the right. That is the share of positions that were internships or fellowships, as opposed to all the other different categories. I need to make this clear. For as long as we can remember, this has been the biggest share of the pie. It's a trend we have seen for the entire time I've been at Columbia. And it holds for all groups here. It holds for the MS students, it holds for the MA students, and the US citizens and the international students. So if you separate out the students who are looking or are taking time off and only consider the students who found positions, basically half of the students found an internship instead of something else. So it really is something that you need to be aware of. For international students, the dominance of internship is even more dramatic. Out of last year's class, about 75% of the international students who had something lined up at graduation had an internship as opposed to a job. So you need to be aware of that. When we talk about internships, we are talking about paid positions. Our students do not go into unpaid positions, unpaid internships. That is thankfully more of a relic of the past. It's more of the domain of undergrads, but our students do not do unpaid internships. The internships are the standard way that news organizations find and train new talent. So, we actually look really favorably on internships. It's the way to jump to a much bigger company, a much bigger newsroom than you were perhaps at before Columbia. And it's how you can transition into a full-time job in that newsroom or a different newsroom. So this is, I know there are probably some international students in the Zoom, so I'm going to just talk a little bit about international students for a moment. This chart shows you how the international students have fared compared to the US citizens and permanent residents in the class. So international students are the red line. And you can see it's been, for many years, it was sort of a little bouncy, just a tiny bit of a difference. And then certainly during that first year of the Trump administration, there was a lot of fear that the visa rules would be changing, and it was a pretty discouraging year for international students, and they had that little dip, as you can see, but then they rebounded the next couple of years. And then the 2020 figure, which you see this big dive, that was the pandemic. And the class of 2020, as I said, they graduated into an economic catastrophe, and it was worse for the international students. There's no question. Some of them had to go home immediately. Some of them got stuck here before they were able to go home. So it wasn't a good scene. Huge improvement for the class of 2021, however, for both groups. So as of August 31st, 78% of the international students had plans at graduation, compared to 75% for the US students. Again, the vast majority of these positions for international students are internships and paid internships, and some of them are paid quite well, and they last from 10 weeks to 12 months. So These are, you know, an internship in the United States means something different in some other countries, but here you're pulling your weight as a journalist, you're filing stories, they're depending on you to help put out the paper or the newscast. So you're in it, and they're short term. You're not doing menial tasks. You're not getting coffee for people. That is just not something that is typical in a US based newsroom internship. International students do get to stay in the United States following graduation for a year. Typically they get to stay for on a 1-year work visa called an OPT. If you are in the data concentration or the computer science dual degree program, you have access to a longer OPT. It's basically a STEM extension that you get on your OPT. The vast majority of our students will do an internship and you know, work in the United States for the duration of their OPT, and then they will have to leave the United States because getting sponsored by a company is something that is pretty unusual, and you need to just be aware of that. Those students who do find sponsorship from a company are typically in the realm of business journalism, economics journalism, or data and computational journalism. So that's just something to be aware of. Spanish language skills, Mandarin language skills are in very high demand in newsrooms. So if you have those skills, that is another way that you might be able to parlay your OPT into a longer term visa. But typically it's not that common. Okay. In addition, immigration law does prohibit the international students from earning money while you're here, while you're a student on campus. And so that prevents you from being able to freelance, for instance. But you know, I would point out that even without publishing anything all year, the international students do find jobs and internships. So it's extremely possible. It's not that common to be publishing while you're in school. Although you'll hear about it when you get here, and it'll make you nervous, but the reality is it's not that common. So you shouldn't stress about it. Okay, I want to show you a really fun chart which shows you the how all these jobs that I just mentioned divide up according to platform. Oops, just lost my earbud. Here I am back again. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is we asked the students at graduation, you know, what platform did you get hired in? And this is what they answer. And as you can see, so the red line at the top, it's sort of like the dominant upper red line, that's the digital only jobs and digital only platforms. The blue line is the broadcast trajectory, and the green line is the newspaper trajectory. And the red, blue, and green lines account for about 80% of all jobs and internships that students get. And it's funny that it's stayed the same for years, that 80% of all positions have been in one of those three platforms. And the orange line, I'll comment on the orange line, that's the magazine trajectory. That has definitely been on a downward slide for a long, long time. Magazines did a couple things. You know, they didn't sort of embrace the internet as fast as they should have. They thought that there would always be a market for people who wanted to curl up in a comfy chair and read a magazine, and that turned out not to be true. But also what happened is that a lot of the kind of writing that students, that people do on magazines, gravitated to digital only platforms that have themes, and then that have you know, regional focuses, like for instance, like the Marshall Project, which covers, you know, criminal justice, and the 19th, which covers gender and issues through the prism of gender. So students are doing magazine style writing and long form writing and voicey authoritative writing, but they're doing it in the digital space more often than not. And the purple line at the bottom is our the Trusty True wire service trajectory, and that's always like a small group of students that get jobs at Reuters, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal online, the Associated Press, Agence France Presse, AFP, Agence France Presse, and it usually accounts for maybe 10% or a little bit less of the class every year. And those jobs are wire jobs where you're writing a lot of stories a day. And they're typically business economics reporting jobs. And so it is the way that students can go abroad most, reliably, because they have hundreds of bureaus all over the world covering business in countries all over the world. So those have turned into, business reporting jobs. And so our students get those jobs and then end up, being sent abroad, oftentimes to their own home countries after being trained here for a while. So this is just a little word cloud of all the companies that hired somebody out of the last couple years. In 2021, 118 newsrooms hired at least one student, and the full list is on our website. And I encourage you to poke around on the J Schools website and look at the career page. The majority of the class of 2021, 54%, were hired to report and write, and that's regardless of platform. So if you take into consideration the graphic I just showed you, just consider that most of those jobs are reporting and writing, whether it's for audio or whether it's for CNN.com, which is primarily a broadcast network. Students are hired to report and write. And in distant second place, 22% of the class said that they were hired to do broadcast production, meaning video production or audio production, for whatever platform they were hired for. And this makes sense because there are fewer students that are seeking to do video and audio production here. And also the on-air reporting jobs are jobs that come together after graduation, because the career track in the on-air reporting world is to just go straight into a job. There isn't like a big, internship system in these small stations all over the world. So students who want to be on-air reporters, and we have plenty of them that are alums, end up creating their reel, putting it together, sending it out after graduation, and then going on interviews, right after graduation and finding something. So that group of students is definitely a group that is successful, but they're not necessarily in our statistics at graduation. So that's why you're not seeing them. Okay. So what do our students earn? Let's talk about pay for a moment. So minimum wage in this is going up in states across the country. And right here in New York, it's $15 an hour. And I mentioned the minimum wage because that's going to be the minimum. And there is a range. And, internships, like I want to point out, they're temporary. Your pay goes up after it's over. And so it's something to keep in mind that it is temporary and it's a foot in the door. So with regard to average pay, I know there's been a couple stories in the press about this, and we have many anecdotes, but we really don't have comprehensive data for the simple reason that the vast majority of students consider this information private. We ask them at graduation, what are you making? And most students don't tell us, and that's their choice. So they don't share the information. However, we get a lot of anecdotal information, which isn't the same, but I think it is a little bit, it's a little bit telling. In the last couple weeks, a May graduate in the Master of Arts program told us that he had been hired after his internship at a substantially higher rate of pay than he was making in the internship. And he's really, really happy. Another MS student told us that her internship at one of the wire services was over, and now she was starting another role at the company at nearly double at what she was making as an intern. And another student who graduated 1 year ago just doubled her salary, going from a small on-air job at a small station in the South to the Washington bureau of one of the big broadcast networks. So that's what I mean about the salaries going up by a lot, once the internship ends. Next slide. So let's talk about the expo. I don't know if you have heard, but we put on the largest journalism job fair in the country. And it's been virtual the last 2 years. We had to immediately pivot to virtual the year of the spring of the pandemic. It happened in March 2020. And then we repeated it in 2021. And it was incredibly successful. We did 2 of them because we had 2 classes graduating, one in May and one in August last year. And that was to diffuse density on campus because of COVID. So we put on 2 expos, but we had 147 news companies participate, and they brought with them 416 recruiters, editors, producers, hiring managers. It was the biggest expo we've ever had. And the reason why it was so big was because it was remote. We were able to get some companies and newsrooms to participate that would have never traveled to New York, even in normal times. We had editors calling in from Vancouver, from New Delhi, from Tokyo, from Los Angeles. We had about a dozen editors from the Los Angeles Times participate during the expo, and they have not made the trip to New York in previous years to that extent. So we are planning a career expo for the current class of 2022. It'll take place virtually in March 2022, and the likelihood that we'll do this again in 2023 is very high because it's successful, and because this is how editors are. This is one of the things that happened that was accelerated during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, recruiters were turning to virtual interviews for that first interview, and the pandemic accelerated that trend, and that's how companies are preferring to do it these days. So the expo gives our students really good practice and a huge access to companies. So I would encourage everybody here to, go on LinkedIn. The Columbia Journalism School's LinkedIn page is fantastic. It's lively and it's accurate. And you can go to the LinkedIn page and then go to the click on the alumni button and just, poke around and see who's at the publications that you desire to work at someday, or in the states where you want to work, or in the countries where you want to work. You'll see that the presence is very high at the biggest newsrooms in the country. So now I like to just talk about some real world students and the trajectories that they experienced before Columbia and after Columbia, just to give you a sense of how this place is a game changer for students. So Pablo was just graduated in the August class. He was from Mexico City, and he had been interning at this sort of long form news site in Mexico, and he came to Columbia, and just as he was graduating, he got a 6-month fellowship at NPR, which was his dream, and he was pretty happy for that to have happened. He was one of these people who fell in love with audio once he got here. He didn't know that would happen, and it did, and he focused on it while he was here, and he got the internship at NPR. Taya was a student at NYU. She had a couple internships at NYU, and then she came to Columbia, and then she interned briefly at Politico, loved it. They offered her a job, but so did Forbes, and it was a full-time job at a much higher salary. So she took the job at Forbes, and she's really, really happy. Shin Hee was an international student who had worked in the Washington Post in the Beijing bureau. She came to Columbia, and she got the Columbia Journalism Review Fellowship, which is one of the fellowships that the J School offers to graduating students that Elena Cabral mentioned earlier. And so she's actually still working there. And it's a writing and reporting and editing kind of fellowship. It's very nice. Career changers. We have always a segment of the student body that are trying to get away from whatever they did before, whether it's law or business or what have you. So Pranshu was working in city government and was rising in the ranks, and indeed he didn't enjoy it. He wanted to become a reporter who reported on the issues of City Hall. And so he came here. He got his first job after J School was an internship at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And then from that perch, he applied for the New York Times year-long fellowship and got it. And that ended, and then the Boston Globe picked him up. And the Boston Globe is a really hard place to get a job at. He's the first alum in years that has gone to the Boston Globe. Laura was in the financial aid office at NYU. She was in academia and in career, in academic services, and she wanted something else. So she came here to really transition to something different, and she went to Savannah, Georgia, at a small station where she got to do absolutely everything from, rains, floods, and, crime in courts to what have you. And now she's at CBS in Washington. And Kate was a lawyer, a prosecutor in the Bronx DA's office, and she is now at News 12 as a reporter. We get lawyers every year. We sometimes have doctors who want to learn how to talk, they want to be like on air, medical advice. We get people who are leaving the world of finance, people who are former accountants. We always have a few teachers in the program who have decided they want to write about education and equity issues, and inequity issues, I should say. Okay, next, we also have just people who have been super focused on journalism for a long time, and they come here to change it up, to either change focus or to just get a different skill set. And so Tuan was really obsessed with sports reporting, and so she did it every single summer of undergrad and came here and then got a full-time job at The Athletic, which is really desirable as a breaking news reporter. Daniel was in the MA business program. He was in the Marine Corps. The Waterdown Daily Times is a small paper. He did that for a few years, and he wanted to get to a bigger place. So he came to Columbia to learn skills that are hard to pick up on the job, skills like accounting and international finance and corporate finance. So he came here and he was hired by Bloomberg. He went into an internship after having been a full-time reporter at a paper. And it's because Bloomberg has this fantastic internship program that is paid really well, and then they hire you at the end, typically. So that's what happened to him, and he's still with Bloomberg. Joyce was also at a tiny station in Biloxi, and she was she thought it was a great experience, but she was growing frustrated at the inability of the station to allow her to broaden the stories, elevate the stories, and do more trend stories. So she decided to come here and switch gears. So she went to Reuters, and then she is now, Reuters offered her a full-time job. She instead decided to go to ABC News. And that's where she's in a fellowship program that'll almost certainly result in her getting hired at, probably before it's over. And then Hannah was in the MA Arts program. She was from the UK, and she had been like the youth reporter for the BBC for a long time, and she wanted to broaden her range, broaden her beat, get out of the youth, beat. And so she came to Columbia and was hired at The Guardian, and now she puts out The Guardian's. They put out sort of the daily, the equivalent of the New York Times, the daily, and that's what she works on. So I also like to show off some recent work. These stories are just from the last few days from our students. Obe was a Zimbabwean business reporter who came here to basically get a better job and hopefully get hired here. So he was hired at the Financial Times. He got an offer at Bloomberg and at Financial Times, and he went with the Financial Times, and he is in New York, and it's a 6-month fellowship with the expectation that he will be hired full-time before it's over. The Surfside condo collapse in Miami was the big news story of the summer. Certainly it was the big story of Miami and Florida, and we had about a dozen grads working on that story, different angles. And Sarah, Ben, and Aaron have been the investigative team that have been just ripping every corner of that story apart. And this came out a couple of days ago, and they're just doing really well. They are dogged. They are great reporters. They're really tenacious, and I would not want to be on the other end of the phone when any three of these call you for information. So they're down there doing investigative, but we also had students doing the obituaries of the victims, and it was just incredible coverage. And the Pandora papers just dropped a couple weeks ago. You probably heard about it. We had at least 4 or 5 students alums working on that story from various at various news organizations. This is a snapshot of the Washington Post page, and they've just been, every papers all over the world were localizing the leaks and finding, local stories to write about for their papers. And we had students involved in around the world, but specifically at the Washington Post. So that's all I had for now. I don't know if there's time for questions, or I'll stick around in case people have questions, but thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your applications.
Thank you, Gina. So that was a really great overview of the career development and the career trajectories of our alums. And so I thought, we were running a little late, but I'll give about 10 minutes if people want to ask any questions in the chat here. You can just write to me. I'm a co-host, Ross Yelsey, and I can read aloud any questions that are, pertinent to this general conversation. If you have specific questions, I recommend you write to us, our office at apply.journalism@columbia.edu. And you can reach out to us with specific questions about the application, about the programs, anything you need to ask about that's more specific to your case. And I also put a link in here as well for signing up for our upcoming virtual events. We're going to have a virtual event next week on our documentary specialization. And the week after that, we'll be doing one with some current students talking more about the student experience to share insights about that, as well as a session about the application itself and about the programs, just giving more of an overview about those specifics. So sign up for those. And we also have Friday sessions almost every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up to have a small group chat with one of our representatives from our office about the application process, financial aid, anything else you're interested in that regard. But I thought one thing that people should be asking that I will answer, I haven't seen the question yet, is when are the applications due? And I should say for the MS programs, which we talked about at the beginning, the MS general program, the part-time, the MS in data journalism, and the PhD in communications as well, the due date for applications to be submitted for this cycle is December 15th. So a little over a month away. So you have time to put together an application for any of those programs. For the Master of Arts program, which Nick has talked about, the due date is January 6, 2022. So you have a little longer to complete an application for that. And for the dual degree with computer science and journalism, that's January 15th, 2022 to submit an application for that. And that application, as opposed to the rest that we've talked about, lives on the Columbia Engineering School's computer science site. So you would go through their application page to apply to that program. Everything else you can apply for through the journalism school website. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will be able to read those aloud. One question we got, this is for Nick, who I think is still here. Nick, for the MA program, we talk about professional journalists being well suited for this kind of program. What kind of reporting skills or journalism skills should they have in order to be successful if they were in this program, even if they haven't worked for many, many years? What kind of things should they be able to know how to do in order to succeed in the MA?
Basically, it's just, the standards, like if you have, we had somebody who came into the program who was years ago, who was in her 50s and was a medical doctor, and she literally had never written anything before or interviewed anybody. And we all agreed at the end that she really should have been in the MS program. I guess the threshold questions I would ask are you experienced at interviewing people, both in person, on the phone, on Zoom, et cetera, in connection with production of journalism? And are you proficient at, writing a story or producing a video piece, just a unit of journalism that you're producing in a deadline situation? We've had some people come into the program. The average age of the program is probably around 30, but we've had people come right out of college and do really well. But those tended to be people who were like the editor of a college paper, and they had just written a ton of stories, even though they were coming out of an undergraduate experience. So it's that level of experience. It's just the basic task of reporting and writing a straightforward story is something that you feel like you've got mastered. That would be the prerequisite.
Great, thank you. And Elena, if you're available, a question about the part-time program, on whether that's a program that would be a good fit for someone who's not currently in the New York area, or should it be somebody who's already kind of situated with a career in the city or around the city in order to be a good candidate for the part-time?
Well, the program is designed for people who live and work in the city. And, they have a lot of advantages in that sense because they know the city, because they have a source of income coming in as they, do this program, and they're very settled here in the tri-state area, at least. But as we've been seeing over the last few years, a number of students have taken the very bold move of making the application, at least submitting it in December, with the intention of seeking employment in New York City and housing, pending that decision. And while that can be something that is a risky proposition, we have seen people pull it off quite elegantly. And so I try not to discourage it, but I do try to get people to really keep in mind the cost of living in New York City. The idea that, for example, gig work is hard to piece together. It does make you make for a very flexible schedule to do this program. But all of those elements have to be in place before considering an experience in the part-time program.
Great, thank you. And this is a question from somebody who I think maybe is wondering if they haven't worked much in journalism. We talked a bit about this before with Rita and Samantha. If you haven't, done storytelling necessarily already in a journalistic way, but you're applying to the MS program, can you still be eligible to apply even if you haven't done that yet and you want to learn how to do that in this school? And in that case, what should you, probably put in your application to make it stand out?
If you haven't done any previous journalism.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And so I guess it just sort of depends on where you are in your trajectory. We certainly do get applications from students who are in a college degree program where they're writing papers on subject areas that they are majoring in, and maybe even some electives that they've done, or maybe they did a little bit of work for the literary magazine, let's say. We get all types of writing samples in the application, I should say. And they run the gamut from legal briefs to scripts for comedy shows and the like, and what I would tell people is to really look back at what you consider to be your very best writing, not ancient history, hopefully, but something fairly recent that really gives a sense of voice. And also, for sure, the idea that you've mastered the basic mechanics of grammar and syntax, and can tell a story. We look at each aspect of that application equally. That includes the writing samples, the essays, the resume, the letters of recommendation, and your transcript, and try to weigh those together to get a sense of the big picture.
Let me add a point on the MA versus MS question. There's a box you can check on your application where essentially you can say, you guys tell me which between those two programs you think I'd be more appropriate for, and we are happy to do that. And it usually, it takes some trust, but it works out almost always very well, just to ask us to sort of make our own recommendation about what would be in your best interest. So if you don't want to make the decision yourself, you can sort of apply to MA and ask us to tell you if we think that's the right place for you, or whether the MS is the right place.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I think we'll have one more question I'm going to ask Gina in a second. But before that, we have one question I can answer very quickly, which is, why is our scholarship application and our application for admission separate? And as the application I mentioned is going to be due December 15th for the MS, January 6th for the MA. That's for the admission process. We'll have a separate scholarship application that will open a little later in the season, usually around December 1st, that you'll have about a month and a half to complete. That'll be separate entirely. But the reason we do that is because all of our admissions decisions for all of our programs is need blind. So we're not looking at anyone's financial background as a reason to admit or not admit a student. So that is why those two processes will be separate. So we definitely recommend people who are interested in financial aid to apply for our scholarship app when that comes open. And we'll have some virtual sessions coming up about that process too. So stay tuned for that. But Gina, to wrap it up, I think we just had a question about, what is it like when you're a student at the school in terms of the access you'll have to your department, the career development office, in terms of getting advice and support throughout the time you're in the school before you're kind of going up to the expo and the things you talked about in the spring semester?
We encourage students to come meet with us one-on-one in the first semester. And I would say most students take advantage of that. It's about an hour-long consultation. And it involves going over the resume with a fine-tooth comb and talking about newsrooms that the student might want to be applying for or targeting. And then there's a lot of training that also happens during the school, how to write a cover letter. We bring in speakers to present talks on medium. Like, for instance, we've got a panel discussion coming up on jobs in data journalism, jobs in audio journalism. The editors from Reuters came in a couple of weeks ago to talk. We had an editor from the Financial Times is coming next week. The Miami Herald is coming to speak to students. So we have a lot of events that we plan all year long. So it's really a part of your journalism education is to take part in the career events that we plan, because it's your way of getting to know all these companies, so you have a better sense of what's out there and what kinds of jobs these companies have.
Great, thank you, Gina. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, all of our faculty members, our current students, our alumni, everyone for providing all these insights into the school. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today from all over the world who asked such great questions. And as I mentioned again, if you have questions that are specific to your case or about specific things you just want more in-depth knowledge about, write to us at apply.journalism@columbia.edu or come to one of our upcoming sessions where we'll go into more depth about certain aspects of the application and the programs as well. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a great day or night wherever you are. Bye now.